and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. Very happy to see you again this week.
And we start off with some tough news. There were anti-LGBTQ rants this week from the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, an NFL coach, and Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, it's been quite a week. A lot of it has hit the news, which is great news. And in better news, the National Trans Visibility March was held in Orlando, Florida, and in other cities around the country.
First time it was outside of D.C. A lesbian pioneer will be on U.S. quarters. We're going to show you the design.
And actually, there's a second among the five, but not quite so out.
Okay.
An out gay federal judge, as you heard first here on Gay USA, stopped Texas's anti-abortion law. But as we also predicted, he's been immediately overruled by his circuit.
That Fifth Circuit. But there was a court victory for transgender people in South Korea. Too late for the plaintiff.
Very sad. The French are moving toward jailing therapists who try to change people's sexual orientation.
And the new Superman has come out as bisexual.
Don't go to France, Superman.
All right, we start off in North Carolina. Well, what a week for, people are letting loose quite a bit, not just these prominent people that we're going to talk about, but we hear about it on the streets and in incidents in schools and all those kinds of things. But in North Carolina, Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who is a theocratic Republican, said that Christians must take control of the public schools because children are being taught about transgenderism and homosexuality, which he called filth. And if you don't like that, I called it filth. Come and see me and I'll explain it to you.
Now,
so, go ahead.
The first thing to understand is that North Carolina, like New York, elects its governor and lieutenant governor separately. So
not quite. Now hold it before I'll stop you. You run for lieutenant governor for the nomination in New York separately, but when you run in the fall, you run as a ticket.
Okay. But in North Carolina, we have a Democratic governor, Roy Cooper, who ousted a horrible Republican before him. So we got a little foothold there. But we have this Republican lieutenant governor who just won't shut up about this. And there's now video going back several years of him with this same line. He is relentless about condemning LGBTQ people as Andy said, filth.
I saw him speaking at a church and he got a lot of amens. There's been calls for his resignation. The Deputy White House Press Secretary Andrew Bates called his comments repugnant and offensive. Robinson says he will defend the right of people in the LGBT community to express ourselves, but children shouldn't be taught about us. Now, Robinson, who is Black, called people who support critical race theory and BLM morons.
He's also gotten support not only in that church speech you saw him give, but our old pal Franklin Graham has stood up for him and as a North Carolinian and is saying, yes.
This issue,
our filth.
And you and I have been fighting this issue all our lives, trying to integrate LGBTQ issues of the schools. It's been an uphill battle. It's become one of the central battles in the race for Virginia governor between Terry McAuliffe and his Republican opponent. So it remains a hot issue for a lot of people. But
it's all hypocrisy. It's all exploitation. It's all just opportunistic, because all we're talking about teaching is respect for everybody. Right. That's all these lessons are about is self-respect and respect from everybody for everybody else. No one's teaching people how to have sex. No one is pushing an agenda other than respect. And these people are coming in and just exploiting the hell out of it, and fear mongering and lying and throwing around these condemnations in order to increase their own power.
So what is Dave Chappelle pushing? I watched the special, The Closer, on Facebook. I have to say, and I can appreciate some ribald humor, I didn't crack a smile the whole time. It was kind of a vile, self-pitying, self-justifying wine fest against LGBTQ people, women, replete with constant racial epithets, which was sadly eaten up by his audience. Now, he made a plea for LGBTQ people not to punch down on Black people while punching down constantly against trans people in this routine. And, it was, Andrew Sullivan, the gay reactionary, said he was rolling around on the floor watching this and how great it was. He's the greatest comedian of all time. But I think it really crossed the line into a lot of hate and violence, although Netflix is defending him because he's very popular and we're not getting rid of him.
They're quite out about their priorities and the fact that they're not taking it down because it is popular.
Jocelyn Moore, a writer and showrunner for Dear White People, said, "I'm not working with Netflix as long as they're running stuff like this."
And they're getting complaints from their employees, including a trans employee who was quite vociferous about this on Twitter, and then was part of a group of, I think, 3 employees who inserted themselves into an executive meeting. She got suspended by Netflix, and they said, "Oh, it's not because she complained. It's because she barged into this meeting."
Right.
Oh, come on. The reason she had to barge into the meeting was because you weren't listening to her complaints that you say were perfectly okay.
We haven't quoted anything that Chappelle said, but he was making anti-trans comments, proclaiming himself to be on Team TERF, a trans exclusionary radical feminist, which he patiently explained to the audience with J.K. Rowling, and then saying, in our country, you can shoot and kill and then he used N-word, but you better not hurt a gay person's feelings. And there was absolutely no expression, and this is going to happen in the football case too, of what people go through in this country and around the world.
Well, and again, hypocrisy, lies, exploitation, none of this is real. And yet he is twisting a situation to exploit it for his own power and fame and success.
Did you watch it? He would pause every once in a while and say, "Well, I worked with Daphne Dorman, who was a trans woman who took her own life, and I'm supporting her daughter and all this kind of stuff. I don't hate anybody. I don't hate trans people. I don't hate LGBTQ." He would just say this, and then he would say the most awful things. It's just...
No, I did not watch it. I was glad you did, so I didn't have to. I have seen the clips. I've seen the clip over and over and over again where he talks about, everybody who was born came from between a woman's legs. Well, first of all, that's leaving out cesareans. But the whole point is that there are trans men who identify as men who do give birth. And so for him to make this statement is completely contrary to, in fact, people's lived experience. It is. It's
let's go to football.
Okay.
So
John Gruden,
the coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, there he is. It's the only team with an out gay player.
Carl Nassib's coach, who welcomed, Gruden welcomed Nassib to the team. Please.
Now, Gruden was exposed years ago for racism, but now he's had to resign when numerous homophobic, racist, and sexist emails were exposed from just a couple of years ago, a lot of them. He said, "I don't want to be a distraction," but he didn't apologize. He's kind of full MAGA. He called Commissioner Roger Goodell, a faggot and a clueless anti-football pussy, said Goodell should not have pressured the coach of the Rams to draft queers, a reference to Michael Sam in 2014. He criticized the league for trying to reduce concussions.
That's the stunner, that he did not even want to protect the lives of his players. He thinks that it's silly to have extra rules about to protect them from concussions. When survey I heard this morning, 99% of the players have concussion injuries.
He also wanted Eric Reed, a player who demonstrated during the national anthem, fired. And by the way, Anna DuVernay and Colin Kaepernick are developing have developed a new series that's going to be on Netflix on October 29th about young Colin Kaepernick, and it looks terrific. So I'm not going to boycott it. I want to watch that. Anyway, he was making $10 million a year. He was afraid that Commissioner Goodell was scaring parents away from letting kids play football. He also called Biden a nervous, clueless pussy. The league has known about this for a while now. This is not news to them.
Look, he is far from the only one. This is the culture across professional sports, in particular football. I'm sure that a vast number of coaches and players talk like this. It doesn't come as a surprise at all. He just got caught as they were investigating the Washington football team. His emails with one of those executives turned up. Meanwhile, the NFL has put out a PSA, a fundraiser for the Trevor Project. We will include that in our weekly email. It's silent, so we can't show it here because it would be a blank spot for those of you listening on the podcast.
We will include it. All right. Shall we move on to
better news?
Orlando. The National Trans Visibility March, we have a couple of pictures of this, was held in Orlando, Florida on Saturday, the first one outside of D.C. There were simultaneous marches in Sacramento, New York, Atlanta, and Chicago with the theme of No Lives Left Behind. And then they had the Pride March in Orlando the next day, and a huge trans flag was unfurled and paraded through the streets. There it is. Look at that. And
all of this is happening in Florida, which is, of course, a state extremely hostile to LGBT people at the moment, particularly trans people, continuing under the leadership of Governor DeSantis to pass anti-trans in sports bills, anti-medical treatment for young trans people. So the courage of people getting out in the streets and holding a trans visibility march is immense.
And yet, you read the latest poll from the Public Religion Research Institute. Now, here's the figure they came up with. 82% of Americans support laws that protect LGBTQ people from discrimination, 10 points up from 2015. 63% oppose religiously based refusals to serve LGBTQ people, which is about the same percentage of the Supreme Court that supports those refusals. However, support for trans girls in girls' sports dropped from 50 to 36%. Americans are evenly divided over what restroom trans people should use.
But there is growing support for anti-trans bathroom bills. And that's all a result of this kind of rhetoric that we've been talking about. The lieutenant governor in North Carolina, Dave Chappelle, John Gruden, the list goes on and on. When this hypocritical lying rhetoric is out there, this fear-mongering rhetoric, it controls what people think and how they feel about this kind of legislation. And they want to just shut it down. They want to shut down people who are different from them. And part of it also is another thing that came out of this poll. 21% of those polled say that they know someone who is trans. That's a low number. I mean, larger than it used to be, but 67% say they know someone who is gay or lesbian. And what we know over the years is that the more people know someone, the more likely they are to support them as human beings and support their issues.
Doesn't everybody know Caitlyn Jenner?
Well, this is why the Trans Visibility March in Orlando is particularly important, and in other cities, and why the more visibility there is, the more people see trans people as human beings and all of us as human beings.
What are all these right-wingers going to do with their new quarters when they come out? The designs are out for the 2022 American Women Quarters. And among the 5 is lesbian space pioneer Sally Ride. She was also the first woman in space. Others are actor Anna May Wong, poet and civil rights activist Maya Angelou, indigenous feminist leader Wilma Mankiller, who was the first woman to be the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, and Nina Otero Warren, a leader in New Mexico's suffrage movement and the first female superintendent of the Santa Fe Public Schools.
Now, Nina Otero Warren had a longtime female partner. She was not out before or after death. Sally Ride came out after she died.
How'd she do that?
By giving her partner encouragement to be public about it after her death. Sally Ride, you know, she's a big favorite of mine because I remember the impact she had as the first woman in space. And I think she was, I mean, talk about a national icon. So for her to come out even after death, I thought was a tremendously courageous move. And she was a fundamentally important figure. And I don't think that quarter portrays her as being as cute as she was. I don't think it does her justice. So redo that quarter and make Sally cuter. But Nina Otero Warren is also regarded as a lesbian, and that makes 2 out of 5. Not bad. And what about that Maya Angelou?
I don't have it in my notes. Let's go to another, call him a gay hero. We told you about Judge Robert Lee Pittman in Texas, who had the federal Justice Department challenge to the state's unconstitutional anti-abortion ban, that he was gay and respected by both parties. Well, maybe not so much by the theocratic fascists anymore, because he wrote a very well-reasoned 130-page opinion striking down the law, the abortion law, and the state, which is perversely not in charge of enforcement, appealed to the reactionary Fifth Circuit and got a stay of Pittman's stay. So the Supreme Court will hear the challenge to Mississippi's anti-abortion law, and Mississippi is asking the court to strike down the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision entirely. That would make abortion entirely illegal in 22 states. In some cases, and just 15 states and the District of Columbia have laws protecting the right to choice.
Well, that's an important point because, as Sherry Shepard said on The View this week, you know, my job is to quote pop culture. She said, but I thought this was the law of the land, Roe v. Wade. That's been in effect for 50 years. And I was waiting for someone to point out to Sherry that legal decisions are not the law of the land. They are a judicial decision which can be overturned and changed. And if you want something to be the law of the land, you have to pass it as a law. And we have, whether it's Roe v. Wade or Obergefell or Lawrence v. Texas, we have coasted on these legal opinions, these judicial rulings for many, many, many decades, but they are all vulnerable to attack and overturning when courts change.
We've got 5 or 6 LGBTQ rights decisions that could be overturned.
And we won Lawrence v. Texas overturning Bowers v. Hardwick. So if we want these things enshrined in law, we actually have to pass laws, and in some cases, maybe constitutional amendments.
But it seems to take the heat off. You know, you get the protection of the court. You say, okay, I have other things to do. I don't have to work on that. But you do. I mean, some states, for instance, on the same-sex marriage issue, they had constitutional amendments against it. And they could have left those on the books, even though they couldn't enforce them. But like in Nevada, they overturned that amendment.
Yeah, but a lot of those still are on the books, and heaven help us if Obergefell gets overturned and the Supreme Court says, well, actually, you don't have a national right to same-sex marriage. And if the states want to do it, they can do it, but there is no constitutional right to it. And then it will go back to the states, as abortion may go back to the states. And those laws that are sitting on the books forbidding same-sex marriage will suddenly pop up as the law of the land.
Well, speaking of the right to life, in New York City, we told you about the death of a gay man, a 24-year-old Izzy Johnson, 24, on Rikers Island Jail, which is a place where so many have gone to die within the last 18 months, more than 10. He died screaming for help with stomach pain all night. Well, the Department of Corrections did suspend the captain and 2 corrections officers in that September 7 incident. Johnson, who has Asperger's, was in for a misdemeanor, and they just couldn't process him in the courts to get him out of jail on a $1 bail. $1.
Well, the dysfunction of the system. All right, let's hopscotch various state situations. Oh, and a little shout out to our President Biden, who on National Coming Out Day at the beginning of this week signed a proclamation for that and included a statement that to the LGBTQ community saying, "You are loved and accepted just the way you are, whether or not you've come out."
And he also signed off on Colorado's expansion of trans-related health care, which is a pilot initiative that will broaden the benefits in another departure from the Trump era. Private health plans will be required to cover hormone therapy, genital reconstruction services, and other procedures sought by trans patients. But it does not take effect until January 2023. But it's the first time the federal government has approved such a requirement in individual and small group plans. More than a dozen states, including Colorado, already cover such services in their Medicaid plans. The AMA and the APA support the expansion.
Well, he also needs to talk to his Health and Human Services Department, because we've just received word shortly before the show went on the air that Lambda Legal Defense, with a lesbian client, is suing HHS because they continue to fund agencies in the states that reject LGBTQ people. In this case, a foster care agency, this lesbian woman applied to be a foster parent for refugees coming into this country and was rejected by the agency because she's a lesbian, not because she wasn't qualified to be a foster parent. And HHS funds this agency, among others. And so Lambda and this woman are suing HHS to try to stop this kind of funding from the government of presumably religious-based agencies that are discriminatory.
Texas, of course, is still pushing anti-gay legislation. But in the meantime, officials at the State Department of Family and Protective Services removed web pages that provided resources for LGBTQ youth, including a link to a suicide prevention hotline. Governor Abbott ordered the removal after one of his primary opponents for next year started screaming about this. The complaint was made by a guy named Dan Huffines, who's running for governor, who owns a real estate development company that you ought to boycott in the Dallas area. He accused Abbott of advocating transgender ideology, which is
shocking that there is anyone to the right of Greg Abbott in Texas. Nonetheless, this guy is trying to claim that ground.
By the way, go to our website. We've got plenty of resources for LGBTQ youth. Go to gayusatv.org.
And also in Texas, in their 98th try this year, they have a made-up House committee, specially created for this, that has now passed yet again a no trans sports bill. This bill had previously been rejected by regular committees in the legislature. So now they've ginned up a phony one to pass it. We'll see if it gets much further in the legislature. They have beaten it back for a while.
In Wyoming, angry local conservatives are trying to have librarians arrested for stocking books on LGBTQ issues. and on how to have a baby in the adolescent section. The Campbell County prosecutor is seeking a special prosecutor to investigate. The library director, Terry Leslie, said, look, we're trying to be the force of reason, and Wyoming Equality.
Reason.
Yeah, reason. But then I said, I'm sorry. Wyoming Equality said it's up to parents to decide whether their kids should have access, but they shouldn't be denied to everybody. The prosecutor said the material was disgusting, but he's trying to uphold the Constitution, he says. I had no such problem with the Baldwin Public Library in the 1960s.
Well, I was just pointing out the continuing theme today of reason versus lies and hypocrisy, that reason is more and more out of favor. This came up because a local pastor, Susan Sisti of the Open Door Church, noticed these books and complained about them. Meanwhile, a trans magician was scheduled to perform at the library, but was assaulted with so many threats that they had to cancel their appearance.
I think it's Piasa, Illinois, Piasa, Illinois, Southwestern High School, a 17-year-old student was brutally beaten for carrying a pride flag on a day when everybody was encouraged to bring a flag that you'd like to display. It was called Red, White, and Blue Day. The assailant was charged.
Oh, well, no wonder. No wonder it's not red, white, and blue, the pride flag.
It has red, white, and blue in it.
Not white. Oh, well, the pride version of it.
The assailant was charged with excessive battery, but some students sided with the bully. You go to Southwestern High, where we support the Confederate flag, and you wonder why you got beat up. It's not Queer Day. Southern Illinois, by the way, used to be part of the Union.
No, a very conservative territory. So let's turn to California, where some sanity continues. Equality California continues to find issues to legislate about there, passing laws, and Governor Newsom continues to sign the bills. This week, a ban on removing condoms without consent, stealthing. We told you this was in the works. It is now defined under law as sexual battery, and those who are the victims of this action can sue for damages. Governor also signed a better privacy law for trans and non-binary people updating various government documents.
And this is the first state to require large department stores to display products such as toys and toothbrushes in gender-neutral ways, not the pink and blue hues that pressure children to conform to gender stereotypes. It doesn't ban boys and girls sections, but it requires a gender-neutral display as well. It does not apply to clothing.
We are grateful to a viewer who alerted us to the life and now death of Ed Siegel of Portland, Oregon. Died at 82. He was a longtime history professor at Reed College and an ardent supporter of gay students, the Gay Men's Chorus, of which he was an honorary director. The Q Center there, the Cascade AIDS Project, the Gay Bar Association there. He was a great activist in the Portland area and is much missed.
And mainly a mentor to LGBTQ students.
Right.
Shall we move to international news?
Certainly.
So the French Parliament voted to ban conversion therapy and authorize jail time for its practitioners. The vote in the lower house was 115 to nothing. It now goes to the upper house and has the backing of President Macron. The penalty up to 2 years in prison and $34,000 in fines, more for offenses involving minors. So this bans conversion therapy across the board.
This issue is moving like a bat out of you know what. We really only started trying to legislate against this a few years ago, and it is sweeping the world.
Well, I guess they all watched Cured on PBS. And by the way, if you missed Cured, I'm gonna link to it in the email so that you can watch the whole thing as long as they keep it up there.
In Murcia, Spain, a gynecologist told a 19-year-old lesbian, who went there for a checkup, that she had an illness as a lesbian, that being a lesbian was an illness. So this poor young woman freaked out, filed a complaint with the hospital for this, went public with it, good for her, and there was such public blowback and indignation that the gynecologist has had to apologize.
Well, he said, this is possible. He said, I made a mistake. She talked about it. I put it in the wrong place on the form. I shouldn't have done that. I'm mortified. Look, I have fights.
Sounds like a John Gruden explanation.
Okay. In Australia, I don't think this guy has any excuses. The new premier of New South Wales, where Sydney is Dominic Perrottet, who opposes same-sex marriage and says children should grow up with a mom and a dad. He's a member of the right-wing Catholic group Opus Dei. Same-sex marriage was enacted in 2017 after a plebiscite. So the #1 radio morning show in Sydney, Kyle and Jackie O, has banned him in protest of his anti-gay views.
Well, when you are being a hypocrite and lying, you should not be given the regular platforms to spread that kind of stuff. We need more of that kind of considered decision making on the part of public platforms. In Turkey, the court there has acquitted 19 students who were arrested for staging this demonstration 2 years ago in Ankara.
18 students and a faculty member.
Yeah. Said that there was nothing wrong with it. It was perfectly legal and they should never have been rounded up.
And you've heard about, the horrible draconian anti-gay laws in Ghana that are being put forth, mainly by the theocratic fascist groups in the United States. So a bunch of activists in New York went to Harlem, to Marcus Garvey Park, to demonstrate there, to protest these terrible laws.
There were gay Ghanaians who testified, who spoke at the demonstration and talked about how horrifying this proposed law is. We're hoping to stop it. There's a lot of uproar about it, a lot of activism against it, but it's on the edge at the moment. We are continuing to follow that. And terrible continuing news out of Afghanistan. Rainbow Railroad, the organization headquartered in Toronto that has been helping refugees from Afghanistan and earlier Syria and Iraq and other places get out of those areas. Rainbow Railroad says it has gotten 750 plus requests for help from LGBTQ people in Afghanistan trying to get out. They say they have reports of the Taliban looking for people by name at homes in Afghanistan.
They have kill lists.
Physical attacks on the street, kill list, yes.
Well, but they say even trying to contact Rainbow Railroad is a risk for them.
Very much so.
So it should be noted that LGBTQ people in Afghanistan didn't have it so great before the Taliban took over.
Yeah, but Kabul and other areas were much more open places. Women were going to school and holding jobs. The Taliban really is shutting everything down.
Read more about it at rainbowrailroad.org.
Yeah. And the fight continues in Poland. The government continues to try to run its own rules against what the European Union tells it has to do, and a court in Poland has now said that that Poland does not have to follow the European Union rules, and the European Union is not happy about this. And we're talking about non-discrimination rules.
They're moving towards a showdown there. All right, so really good news and very sad news out of South Korea. We told you about the trans staff sergeant, Byun-Hyu Soo, who was discharged a couple of years in 2020 for being transgender. At first, the military said, well, we really can't do that because she's a woman now. So let's say she has a mental disability and throw her out. She sued, but then in August 2020, she took her own life. Her relatives inherited the lawsuit and won in the court. The court ruled her discharge was unlawful. So now she's a martyr who advanced the cause. Advocates are demanding that the military not appeal this, and they have not yet committed not to appealing the decision.
Strange. You'd think South Korea would be a little more advanced on this, but not yet. In Cuba, another meaningless show meeting by the president of Cuba, who here is meeting with Mariela Castro and LGBTQ people. But meanwhile, the real activists, the real LGBTQ activists who were jailed for protesting the government are still in jail. So
that's true. You can't protest there without getting arrested, but the government is committed. He's committed. Miguel Diaz-Canel is committed to putting same-sex marriage on the books.
It is, well, it's in the proposal of the new family law plan or whatever that's going to be voted on. We'll see whether it actually gets passed. I'm a little skeptical about how much he's actually supporting.
It's like Charlie Brown on the football over there on those issues. China has now banned video games with LGBTQ characters and effeminate men, and they're preparing to invade Taiwan.
Yes, they are. Talk about serious. But nonetheless, in Germany, you can park your car in a preferred space because they have designated parking spaces for gay people.
Well, they say this is for safety. It's closer to the exits, and they are also making it available to migrants who are drivers who don't want to be wandering around in the parking garage trying to get out.
Because parking by a rainbow flag is not going to make you a target for...
All right. It's something new. In London, The Normal Heart is on at the National Theatre, starring Ben Daniels, and has gotten nice notices. At the end of Friday's performance, Peter Tatchell stood up and shouted, "Never forget, Margaret Thatcher's government did nothing in the early years of AIDS. Thousands of gay men were infected, many died. Shame." I've done this in a London theater once about something else, and they get quite shocked when people speak out.
Shocked, but I'll bet the reaction is muted.
You never know. It might have gotten applause. I didn't hear the whole thing. All right.
Well, I'm saying no one's throwing tomatoes in a London theater. Okay. All right. Well, that's a good segue to AIDS news. And we want to, I want to alert you to something happening next week. Peter Staley, legendary AIDS activist, has a new book out, a memoir called Never Silent, Act Up in My Life in Activism. I'm going to be doing an online interview with Peter on October 18th. That would be Monday at 7:30 p.m. Through Greenlight Bookstore. We'll put the details in our show note, but if you go to greenlightbookstore.com, you can get the details and listen in if you'd like.
It's Peter's journey from closeted Wall Street bond trader to AIDS and LGBTQ activist. In New York, Governor Kathy Hochul signed a bill decriminalizing the possession and sale of hypodermic needles and syringes. It's only 40 years into the AIDS pandemic.
I thought we did that years ago. Maybe it was just the city.
She was responding to the opioid pandemic in this case. The bill establishes...
We did needle exchange decades ago.
Needle exchange, but this is sale, a sale of these possessions, those kinds of things. And the bill establishes medication-based addiction treatment in state and local prisons and creates a directory of medications that can reverse opioid overdoses. She said she had a nephew who died of an overdose.
It's always a personal connection. But I'm impressed by what happened in New Jersey this week, where the state attorney general took note of the fact that there is still an HIV criminalization law in New Jersey. This exists in states across the country, again, passed in the bad old days of really huge fear and stigma, where they said that they passed laws to make it illegal for people with HIV to have sex, particularly if they had not informed their partner that they have HIV. But even if they'd informed their partner, just the act of having sex, even if it was protected sex, even if you were undetectable because you were on medication, it was criminalized. It still is in many places. But so the state attorney general, as a law is proposed and pending to get rid of that in New Jersey, sent out guidance to the prosecutors in his office and said, even though this law is on the books, here's what you need to know before you try to prosecute anyone. First of all, you have to find out whether this was forced sex, because if it wasn't, you may not want to prosecute someone, and find out if it was forced transmission of HIV. And if not, hold your horses. And was the person with HIV on medication and undetectable? And if so, don't prosecute them. And check with me before you prosecute anyone. And I think this is just an enormously enlightened attitude and exactly what we're looking for while we go through the process of repealing these heinous and inappropriate laws.
More enlightenment in Mexico City, where a law that made contagion a crime for people with HIV was ruled unconstitutional.
Yeah, very good news, but less enlightenment in Argentina, in Cordoba, where a 22-year-old laborer was convicted and sentenced to 3 years in prison for infecting a female sex partner. His lawyer is claiming, hey, you don't know who gave it to who. Maybe she gave it to him. It's a messed up case. It's again, criminalizing this is just insane.
When you're talking about criminal, the former guy in the White House was whipping up anti-Haitian hysteria and anti-AIDS hysteria this week, saying all these Haitians coming in were bringing AIDS with them. And it's not even statistically true. It's so heinous, but he gets no pushback from his party.
Fear-mongering. Keep that in mind. It's all fear-mongering. Meanwhile, the Health and Human Services Department did a good thing, yes, distributing $2.21 billion across the United States for care, treatment, and services for HIV-positive people under the Ryan White program for low-income people with HIV. And that's a significant increase in money.
Ready for entertainment news?
I am.
Well, the big news was about Superman, the new Superman from DC. There he is, from DC Comics. He's Jonathan Kent, the son of Lois Lane, is enjoying a romance with his male friend Jay Nakamura. John is bisexual. Since he was introduced in July, he's been combating wildfires caused by climate change, thwarted a high school shooting, and protested the deportation of refugees in Metropolis. Can he save truth, justice, and the American way from U.S. fascism?
Well,
have a better idea?
Dean Cain, the former Superman on TV, says, well, why doesn't he go fight in the Iraqis who are throwing gay people off of buildings?
Dean Cain.
Okay, that'd be fine too.
Dean Cain is trying to make up for playing a gay role in Broken Hearts Club years ago, back in 2000. He's a right-winger.
Well, it is kind of stunning to think that the progeny of Superman would be bisexual. That's kind of a cool.
Why not?
So the American Ballet Theater, to go to the other end of the cultural spectrum, is going to have a couple of Pride Nights at the end of this month on October 27th and 30th, where they will have among their offerings a performance of a ballet called Touché, which is a male pas de deux love story.
It's the first ever male pas de deux in it by Christopher Rudd.
Choreographed by Christopher Rudd. They're also going to have an LGBTQ photo display in the lobby of the theater. And we have the trailer showing us some of the ballet and its conception. So here is the video of that.
It's at the David Koch Theater, named for a reactionary plutocrat who worked against democracy and our rights. All right.
Yeah, I thought there was a little more of it, but we cut out. It actually looks quite affecting.
You've heard of Squid Game. It's getting a lot of attention. Is this also on Netflix? I think it is. Chris Cooper, our colleague, tells us it's a cross between Hunger Games and They Shoot Horses, Don't They, suffused with the usual economic and class consciousness in these Korean films. But he says now this is a spoiler alert. Don't listen if you don't want to know about this. Near the end, it goes full homophobic, resorting to the tired homosexuality as shorthand for evil theme. And Chris asked us to warn you about that.
Consider yourselves warned. I watched the first episode of the second season of We're Here on HBO, where the three drag queens travel to small
towns,
rural reactionary towns. This was Spartanburg, South Carolina. It's a knockout. It's great. It's certainly a heartstring tugger, but it's like Queer Eye version 2.0, and a definitely more sophisticated, insightful version. It's quite moving and stunning, and I'd really recommend it. It's only a few episodes on HBO. We're Here.
Well, speaking of drag queens, RuPaul just inked a deal with Sony TV to launch his own production company, RuCo, to produce new scripted series, comedies, dramas, animated. He has not announced if he will star in any of them, and he's going to keep doing RuPaul's Drag Race.
Inked a deal? Are we the Hollywood Reporter now?
I probably read it in the Hollywood Reporter. Oh, by the way, CBS Sunday Morning, did you see it? A terrific profile of Billy Porter.
It was very nice. I did see it. I didn't think there was anything new in it, but Billy Porter is always worth watching.
A nice concentrated 8-minute thing with Billy about his troubled childhood and how he rose to stardom by being himself.
Yes, excellent message. And of course, he is just stunning to look at in all his various costumes all day long. So yeah, we're going to include a link to that in the show.
Yes, I already have it. And more Chris Cooper news. He called the new Bond film, No Time to Die, solidly entertaining. He likes looking at Daniel Craig for 3 hours, he said. And it doesn't feel that long. His complaint is that the villain is poorly defined. He's also going to be at a free online event at the New York Public Library Wednesday, October 20th at 7 p.m., moderating a conversation with experts and organizers on how they're building awareness about birds and strengthening communities that protect them. We're going to link to that in our email. By the way, the book that Chris is working on, it was revealed, is called Better Living Through Birding.
Well, Chris is now the third person I've heard praise the new Bond movie. It got very mixed reviews from the critics when it was released just a little bit ago. But I have now talked to 3 separate people who've seen it and who have really loved it and found it extremely entertaining. In one of the reviews I read, it said something about, it made a reference to the Daniel Craig Casino Royale, the first, as with him as Bond, the remake of the original, as being by far the best in the series. I have generally thought that the Daniel Craig Bonds had terrible scripts. I like Daniel Craig. I'm happy to have him as Bond, but I really did not enjoy the movies. But it made me watch Casino Royale again because it just happened to be on TV that day. And I enjoyed it more than I did the first time around. So now
like Daniel Craig, he's coming to Broadway in Macbeth, I believe.
I will wait. Maybe I'll go see No Time to Die instead. I don't need to see him.
But there is hot Oscar buzz about Power of the Dog. Benedict Cumberbatch is a 1920s cattle rancher afflicted with toxic masculinity, who sort of falls for a young man, played by Cody Smith McPhee. I saw lines down the block for people to see a preview of this in our neighborhood.
Haven't we seen this story before also?
People think it's a great film. I'm just telling you. And by the way, that opera that we told you about, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, based on bisexual Charles Blow's memoir at the Metropolitan Opera, will stream in cinemas on 10/23. And now that they're filming it, I hope they bring it to PBS.
I'm gonna see it next week at the Met.
Oh, you're going to go to the actual theater. You're back in the theater, Ann. I haven't gone back yet.
Well, for this, I'm going back to the theater because I really want to see this. And I think I considered going to see it in a movie theater, but I thought if I had the chance to see it at the Met, I would do it.
Get your booster.
I do want to get my booster, and I will certainly be wearing my mask, and I am fully vaccinated. So
you can make an appointment at CVS. I just have to.
Well, I got my original Moderna shots at Walgreens. Shouldn't I go back there?
Perhaps. I don't know.
And has it been approved yet? I mean, I know you got
you're
it.
Waiting. You're waiting. I got the weaker Pfizer shot. But
yeah, so I'm Moderna, so I think I have to wait a little.
Right. At the go ahead.
Well, I was going to go back to a little entertainment news. The L Word Generation Q just ended its season on Showtime with a lot of cliffhangers. So I assume it's coming back next year. Again, I enjoyed the series this year, but the LA Times had a column this week that talked about it being very confused this year and jumbled up. And I have to agree with that. Rosie O'Donnell, a sort of messy character, and it was kind of messy, but I'm still hanging in with it.
So the New Fest, which is the LGBTQ film festival in New York, but it's available online around the world, and there are in-person showings October 15th through 26th. Our viewer Andy Taines is recommending Firebird, about 2 soldiers who meet in the Soviet Army some time ago and have a romance. It's based on a true story. And The Sixth Reel, a new film, that's a shot from Firebird. Those are the guys, and they look like they're having fun. And the other one is called The Sixth Reel, a new film by and with Charles Busch that Andy says, is fun and silly, and also stars our pal Julie Halston.
Now, we saw Firebird last year, I think, or earlier this year. I think it had a short theatrical run. And I can't remember whether I liked it or not. But
I didn't see it. You saw it.
I saw it. Sometimes the press agents will send us screeners, and I did see. I talked about it on this show, but
did you see JoJo Sliwa's gender-bending Cinderella dance on Dancing with the Stars?
Yes. Nothing has topped her Britney Spears tango last week. But the Cinderella was pretty great. She played the prince, and her partner was Cinderella, and they did a very nice dance and got very high marks. And then they had a second night of Disney villains. The Cinderella was Disney heroes, And again, they got high marks. And so they're still on the show as it slowly gets whittled down. And more importantly, the Red Sox are moving on in the baseball championship.
And it's a big Bo Sox fan.
Shocking that they beat Tampa, considered one of the best team, top ranked in the American League, by far the best record. But Boston, after taking a breather by losing the first game in the series, then went boom, 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 1, 2, 3, knocked him out, and is moving on to play the very scary and cheating Houston Astros. We'll see. This is a best 4 out of 7. We'll see how that goes. We'll be keeping a close eye on that. And I'll also be keeping a close eye on the second season of 20s coming up on BET starting very shortly. This is the series that Lena Waithe created and writes and executive produces. It's about a young queer Black aspiring screenwriter in Hollywood. It's very cute, very clever, very snarky, and the heroine is kind of butch and flirtatious. And
is it based on Lena?
Well, it certainly bears a strong resemblance to Lena. Yes. And so that is coming up with season 2 on BET. I suspect you can catch the first season on demand or streaming somewhere. 20s is because it's a young woman in her 20s. And that is returning to BET any minute now.
Here's something that might make right-wing heads explode. Barry Manilow, out gay, is set to break Elvis's record of 837 consecutive shows in Vegas, based on his bookings into 2023, if we all survive that long, at the Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino. Beat Elvis's record.
I think Barry is gaining in strength. We'll have to ask Rob Shooter, because it's his husband who co-writes songs with Barry. So we'll have to check in with Rob.
So yeah, this was kind of a rough week. We were getting it from all sides.
We were, and it's always depressing to hear that kind of stuff. All these lies, all this fear mongering is extremely depressing. But I am somewhat encouraged by the fact that there's a lot of pushback, and John Gruden did have to resign, and no one's supporting him.
I'm encouraged by, we quoted that poll about how people feel about us, and basically it's positive.
But what happens is that it's positive, people support us, but then when push comes to shove at the polls, that doesn't seem to be such a priority for people. And
that is correct. But I hope it's a priority in Virginia this week, because not this week, this month, because votes are underway there and our rights are on the line.
And there's a governor's race in New Jersey too, and I'm more confident that we're going to be okay with that one. But really, we have to pay close attention.
Thanks for tuning in. We're out of time.
Now we have 10 more seconds, or 5, 4, 3, enough. We will see you next week.